So, Mr. JLP, Mr. Jesse Lee Peterson, it is amazing. It's amazing to have you here with us again today. Thank you for agreeing to come on this interview.
Amazing. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, I have done extensive research about you, and I am just elated at a lot of the things that I found. A few of the things: you were born in the 40s, you were born in Alabama, and you lived through the Jim Crow era. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I remember for colors only signs, for whites only. I do remember the Jim Crow thing happening, but it didn't affect my life personally because I had my grandparents there, my parents were up in north, and we were working, and to me things seemed to be fine, to be honest.
So there were a lot of communities that we talked about coming from the time and the period of slavery, where there were a lot of Black people or people of color who actually owned cities. They owned a lot of property. They owned buildings. They owned so much. And a lot of these communities were drowned out and flooded out. Now, were you able to actually make contact with some of these communities?
I know I In my own family, I remember one of my aunts got married, and she and her husband bought buku land, and they had what 15, 16, 17 children. And this was during the so-called Jim Crow area. And all the kids finished high school, and I think all of them, if not almost, went to college. My best friend, by the way, his family was like that as well. They didn't have to work the plantation the way that we did, but they nearly everyone in my class, to be honest, and I went to an all black school, of course. They integrated the last year that I was there in 1968. But all of them, they became professionals. They started their own businesses. They became nurses and doctors and things like that.
Absolutely. So that's good to hear that these people were able to actually come up and become successful, even during a time where history is telling us now that no, that didn't happen. There weren't any successful Black people then. We're just giving you a slice of the pie now, and that's not the case. We see that there were people who were very successful. So, what was life like growing up for you? Did you have both parents? How was it? What was life like then for you?
For me, my mother my mother married my stepfather. She got pregnant, with my father, by my father, but uh, he didn't want to get married. He didn't want to at the time. He didn't think it was his. I was his son. He didn't think I was his child. So before my mother had me, she got married to my stepfather because in those days it was a shame to have children out of wedlock, and she didn't want me to be born out of wedlock, and so she ended up getting married before I was born so that I would not be born out of wedlock.
Right.
And so they went on to have eight more kids. And then my father got married to another woman eventually, and they had four more kids with his wife. But I was close to everybody. But I wanted to stay in Alabama with my grandparents because that's where I was born. I grew up there. So when my mother, her husband, moved to Indiana, I stayed in Alabama. I did go up and visit. I lived up there off and on at times, but I stayed in Alabama. I worked the cotton fields. You know, I helped my grandfather around the barn where they would bring the cows in to milk them and feed them and things like that. But in all honesty, my life was amazing down in Alabama. I don't ever remember thinking, "Oh, I have such a horrible life," or And when I started dating at 15, I would ride. My grandfather gave me two horses, and I would ride my horses over to see my girlfriend Sundays after the church and Sunday night coming back home. I finished high school barely because I never really liked school, but I did finish. I don't know how, but I graduated. And then I moved to LA, and it's just been one thing after another. But
What
I've
made you
always
want to
had
move
enough.
to LA?
Well, what happened was when I was in the 11th grade, my aunt and her husband invited me out for the summer. And so I came out here and I really liked LA. And I'm like, I'm gonna go back home. I'm gonna finish high school. So I had one more year left, and I finished. Then I moved back to LA. Oh, well, I went to Indiana from there when I finished high school. I went to Indiana. I got a job, and I made one paycheck so I could fly out to LA. And so I
Wow.
made a paycheck. I flew back because the opportunities that was here were here. It was beautiful. It looked like paradise when I first came out here. And that's what really drew me back because originally I was going to live in Atlanta, Georgia, because Georgia used to be really, really nice too when it was run by the white people, because white people used to be in control of Georgia. It was a beautiful place to live.
No,
But I decided to
absolutely.
stay in LA.
Absolutely. I love the fact that you said, I mean, I'm just going to for shock value because I know people when they hear that you say these things, they're like, what? He's absurd. He's great. No, I see it. And and a lot of the times when we have the worst areas in any state, we go through what's called gentrification. And when we think gentrification, naturally we think of the white people coming in and uprooting some of this craziness going on. So
Yeah.
even though, the way that you said it is a little bit blunt, I do agree.
But yeah,
I
it's the
can
truth.
say that the areas that, when you make a little bit of money and you're able to move from the inner cities, you get a different experience when you deal with a
That's
different
right.
type culture. That's what it
That,
is, the culture.
that's what when I noticed that when entertainers, black entertainers, black anybody black, when they make some money, when they start doing well, the first thing they do is move out of the black so-called black communities because they know what's going on there,
Yeah.
and they move into the white communities. They move into the nicer areas. And Atlanta, at one time, this was like in 1968 when I finished high school, graduated. And Atlanta was a beautiful area. I used to go up there for the summer, and it was really, really nice. And I had thought that I was going to live there, but I ended up moving here. And now both LA and Atlanta is a mess. It's hard to live in either one of those places right now.
If you had an opportunity to move, to just uproot, not to, I know you have businesses, several of them. You are a mogul as far as entrepreneurship. I mean, you're an activist, you're a radio personality. I've seen you the other day just on Prime Video on Amazon. You are on Rumble. You have so many different accolades up under your belt. And so, if you could just uproot and leave right now, where would you see yourself?
That's a good question because we were and still at one time we were thinking about moving just before the Chinese virus happened. We had I was told that
Right, but let's call a spade, and we'll talk about that later. But that is
right.
factual. Everything that you're saying is factual. It's just funny the way that you say things, and I love it. I love it.
Well, we
Continue.
were
I'm so sorry.
the in LA they're building a lot of apartment buildings now, right? They're tearing down small businesses and things like that and building apartment buildings. So this building that I'm in, the owner had said that they were going to tear it down and build a big apartment complex. And they had given us a notice that we needed to move. And so we had started looking around in places like Texas and Florida and just to kind of get a feel of where we wanted to go. But then the Chinese virus happened. And when the Chinese virus hit, everything shut down. And so we couldn't move because of that. So the manager was okay with that. So we waited. And then the Chinese virus settled down. But by the time that happened, the economic system everything cost so much and became bad. So right now we just settled right now. Everything seemed to be fine. But eventually I definitely want to move somewhere. I'm just not sure where yet. And I don't, unless I see what to do, I don't make any decisions till I see clearly what to do. So I'm just waiting to see if and if we do move, where we will move to. Because what I noticed is that Texas is now becoming blue, and a lot of folks left California and other areas went to Texas. And now I'm hearing, and I've gone there several times for different events, and people are telling me, hey, Texas is becoming blue, and the white folks are moving to the suburbs of Texas, but the crime and stuff is following them out there too. And then Florida is happening too, slowly but surely it's starting to change. So that's why I tell people you can't run from evil. You have to face it. You have to
No,
face it within
yes.
yourself and overcome it, and face it in other people and overcome it. You can't run. You got to stand up and fight back.
No, absolutely. And so a few things in regards to what you said is when you're looking for a location, a few good places to look is my husband and I, we buy locations as far as land. We buy what's called raw land. And if you look at the clauses and the different principalities, surrounding that, you can find land by the acres in like New Mexico and Texas, places like that. Now, I've actually lived in El Paso, Texas, and it was so beautiful, but the crime rate, like you said, was very high. I mean, the chances of being robbed and killed or like and thrown over the border, literally just thrown, because it's right there, right? If you have an
Yeah,
idea, state idea, you can cross back and forth over as long as you're walking and not traveling, right?
yeah,
So it's pretty interesting. So one thing I will say is I will pray for you, and that you continue, you and your staff and everybody involved with you continues to look, search, but be open. That, you said, you mentioned a few things, blue, but like you said, there's a calling. And when God is moving you to
yeah,
act, sometimes you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to have to go to those areas that you thought you would have never went to before and talk about things that you ordinarily would not have. And
yeah.
so this may be your calling to venture out. But I'm not one to prophesy over you. I'm just telling you. And I do respect that. And I appreciate your incentive and to know, listen, it may be time to move around and seek other options.
Yeah, I'm definitely not. I mean, if it became clear that I should move to Texas or Florida or wherever, I'd totally be willing to go. I would have no problem with that at all.
I'm in
And
Georgia, so I definitely think you should come here. But in
yeah,
the spirit, that's just me, and my human, force. I feel like if you come to Georgia, I'll be able to participate. I'll be able to help, get involved, even volunteer. You know what I'm saying? I'm not hurting financially, so I'll be able to volunteer my time services. But
that's amazing.
whatever you decide, I definitely I am praying for your well-being, and I'm praying that it goes not in the way that you want it to go, but I'm praying that it goes in the way that God wants it to go, and that
Absolutely.
his will take place on earth as it is in heaven. Now, I want to move forward with a few
Thank you.
questions. You did mention blue. So I just want to confirm with you, you seem in your activism as if you are a Republican. You refer all the time and oftentimes to Trump being the great hope. Now, is it still correct to assume that you are, in fact, Republican?
Absolutely. I'm still Republican. One time, as you know, I was a Democrat, but when God changed my heart, he changed my values. And so I went and asked him for one more favor. I'm like, hey, I need one more favor from you. And God was like, what? What is it? I said that you have changed my heart. So my values have changed. And I read the Democratic platform, I read the Republican platform, and I can no longer identify with the Democratic platform. And so I like the Republican platform because it was about God, country, freedom, Constitution, and all that. And so God, like, yeah, no problem. I forgive you. Go ahead. And so I became a Republican 34 years ago. And I'm still a Republican. I vote Republican, though I don't like what the Republican Party has turned out to be. In my opinion, we only have a one party system now. And I'm looking at these Republicans, except for a few of the Republican representatives, the Republican Party is just like the Democratic Party. It has changed so drastically that I don't recognize it
Excuse
as
me.
I did. Bless you. I don't recognize it as I did 34 years ago. But I still vote Republican,
No,
and
absolutely.
I vote for the Great White Hope. As a matter of fact, someone I had a birthday, and
Happy
someone
birthday.
gave me a Great White Hope watch. Can you see it?
I can. That looks nice. I love it. I love it. I love it. And as a fellow Republican, I'm definitely involved in activism and getting out here, knocking doors, calling, providing resources. Sometimes you have to vote with your pocketbook.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely involved. A few things that I want to talk about with you, of course, is Trump and how you felt about him. And of course, you just said he's the great right hope again. So, of course, you agree with what's going on. And you say, listen, I support him. He's under attack. And I think about, a few things. A few things here that I think about are Trump and the fact that he's under attack. And we think about the government, and the government says that if you don't go with what we are for, then you're against us. And I don't think that's 100% so. I think that, like you said, I am Republican, but I don't oftentimes like the things that they're doing. I think that you can be in support of the municipalities, so to speak, such as the police department, not calling to defund them, because it's a bad call when you put an officer who's inexperienced in a high crime area. It's a bad call when you put an officer who has no experience with other ethnic groups, but you put him in minority communities. And so what we're seeing here is a lot of humane decisions that are coming back to be and reported to be foul. But that's a human error. So, but when we look at these organizations and we see what these organizations represent, some of these people in relation to the organizations are actually fighting. They're fighting for our freedoms, and they're here to try to make sure that we have the things that we need through a jurisdiction, which is the judicial system. What are your
Right.
thoughts about that? Do you feel like it's all corrupt, or do you feel like there are persons who are trying with the best in them to uphold the law and make sure that all citizens have what they need to move forward?
Well, definitely there are people within there that are fighting for what is right. They're fighting to bring things back to order. And it's just that I noticed that most of the leadership representative of the Republican Party are rhinos. They're about themselves, they're about money. And I noticed that like with Ukraine, for an example, they're sending buku money over to Ukraine over and over again, while in our own country, they're doing nothing to shut down the borders. There are illegal aliens coming in, as you know, from around the world and putting all of our lives at risk. And then we're having to take care of them with our tax dollars. And the rhinos and others are not doing anything about it. I also noticed that, as you said, the crime is out of control, defunding the police and all that. The Republicans are not doing anything about that, except for a few are speaking out about it, of course. But instead, they wasted a lot of time on Hunter Biden.
Yeah,
You know, you
yeah,
know, whatever they need to do with Hunter Biden's situation, that is nothing compared to shutting down our borders, sending these folks back home, doing something about what's happening in the schools, doing something about crime. Take care of the primary issues first, and then deal with the Hunter Biden. But they're all into the Hunter Biden. Then they come on the news or go on the news and act like they're fighting for America. They're not fighting
absolutely.
for America. That's a show. That's an act. It's not the real
Absolutely.
deal.
Absolutely. And may I remind you that it's 85,000 children. Now, we're not even getting into the women, the males. We're talking about 85 over, excuse me, over 85,000 children that are missing under the Biden administration. Under the Trump administration, during the borders were in regards to the borders, it was 1,500. Okay, that's 1,500. We're talking about 85,000 children. And then we talk about Ukraine, and we talk about China and the relationship with the Wuhan institutes, and the fact that Obama was pouring money, flooding the gates of money into these institutes for clones, chimeras, people who were born with animal body parts and born with animal hearts and things like this. You understand what was being funded. And then we talk about the fact, and in China, how they have children who are in prison. They are using children as slaves in China. And we think about America. Okay. And we think about, we have a black market. The black market is not just limited to getting your drugs, your weed.
Yeah.
Now you can get body parts, you can get a heart, you can get an arm, you can get whatever you so desire, right? On the black market. The economy, the government knows everything about this. They're not shutting this down. And it's 85,000 children that are not accounted for, somewhere trapped in these black markets. And we think about the LGBTQ community, QI, whatever. I always get it flipped up a little bit. But and we think about what they're representing, and we say there are three genders. I was like, no, there's two genders according to what biology teaches me in school. I'm a biology major currently. You know what I'm saying? I have my own medical practice. I actually cleared out a few patients all, of my daily schedule to be able to be here with you right now. And I'm telling you, based on research, there are the male, the female, but of course we have to allow room for error. There are persons who possess both the male and the female counterparts. So there are three, sexes. And then we talk about genders, and these people want to pour in, all these genders, but there are furries. There are people who identify as animals, who identify as animal beings, who are having sexual intercourse with animals, and they're attacking themselves under the LGBTQ communities. And these people are fighting for rights. And we're like, listen, I understand there's a third gender. We understand there's something that happened where there's another chemical imbalance, just we have people with schizophrenia and all these different personalities. We have now people who associate themselves as different beings. Okay. And in an effort to be just, we say, we're going to give them rights. But when we look further deeper into these LGBTQ communities, these people are having some sort of mental illnesses where they feel like they are animals and they want to have sex with animals. And it's just not right. What are your thoughts about that? And I know this is totally separate and different from anything, Jesse, that you probably have experienced growing up from that Jim Crow era. What are your thoughts?
Well, I realize that our battle is a spiritual battle. It's a warfare between good and evil. And the reality is there is God, and there is the devil. And that these spirits have made a home in human beings, the evil spirits, which is of the devil, and make homes. It lives in human beings. It lives in the imagination and the emotions. And if you identify with those thoughts and feelings you get, you start to believe that it's really you. And so when you believe that is you, then you start to fight to keep this false identity that you picked up. And so what we have going on now is that because in our country, they are pushing anger as good, mm-hmm. and they are pushing good as evil, right? Mm-hmm. And so the devil is making a home in people, and he's ruling over them by making them feel that they're a certain person when they are really not. Those are false identities. But when you get to know yourself, first you got to forgive, so that, especially, and start with your parents first.
And can I interrupt you? Not trying to be rude or anything, but I also want to touch on the DNA. So you're saying that these people are feeling like this, but when I look, like I told you, I'm a biology major. I like to do research. I research with not only the chemistry and the bio that we're made up of, but also with nature. You see what I'm saying? So my research is very extensive. And the things that I'm learning, I've learned about DNA. DNA is very, very, very productive to who we are. It actually determines who we are, but it also determines our makeup, our build, and things like that. And we're constantly in a society where we're doing something called gene editing. We're constantly mixing our DNA with other people's DNA, and that is rewriting our DNA. That is rewriting history. That is also rewriting the human being as we know it. So a lot of persons may have gotten a blood transfusion, an organ donation, or things like that, and they may be feeling different emotions after they've gotten this. Like, I feel like a man. Some people have said, women have said, I feel like a man after I've gotten a kidney transplant. And that's because we are rewriting DNA. So with what you're saying, is science to blame for a lot of this? Do you agree or no? What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know a lot about what science is doing with this whole thing that they're doing. I'm not educated enough about those things as far as science, but I do know that because I do know that we are a spirit and we live in a body, and I do know that if you identify with the in the Bible, Paul talked about I'm not able to change the things that I do the things that I don't want to do, and I can't do the things that I want to do. So I realized something made a home in me. and that's something that's made a home in him and in all people until they are born of the Father. It's the spirit of the devil. And if the devil can make you think and feel something, he sounds like you and makes you feel and think that way. And if you believe it, you take it on. And I counsel with men and women around the world who believe they feel like a woman or they feel what they think is like a man, even though there's no feeling to being a man. But they say they feel that way. But I notice that when they go and forgive and they are born again of the Father, because all who are born of the mother must be born of the Father. And when they're born, then God take that feminine spirit away and give you back his nature, and you'll be fine. I do want to ask, did you say that there are three genders?
Okay, so a few things. Yes, I did say that there are three genders. And the reason that I say this is because extensive research it involves all human beings. And there
Right,
are people who are born male, people who are born female, but genetically there are something called mutations. And I don't want to call these persons mutants or,
right.
attack them because I want them to be delivered by the Spirit, by the Holy Spirit. I want them to see that there is deliverance for you. You're not alone. You have people who love you. And so, but there are persons who are born with both genitalia. They're born with um the male, the penis, and they're also born with vagina.
Oh,
And in
yeah,
doing this, so they're called hermaphrodites.
right.
Years ago, you would call them hermaphrodites, but today they are going as intersex. And the reason that they were called hermaphrodites is if you remember hermaphroditus, it was actually years ago. What is it? Ancient Greek, Roman mythology, and it kind of detailed things such as hermaphroditus, which was like a figure or a mythological creature who had both. Very beautiful, looked like a woman, very beautiful, and sometimes depicted as a male, of course, but had both genitalia. And so we have to recognize that these persons do exist. We have to, because they do exist. And
Yeah,
in the instance that their parents decide, at an early age, that say, listen, you are a male or you are a female, but after, years come, they say, I feel like a male. And I remember 46 chromosomes. There's two chromosomes that we have, X and a Y. Mother has XX, father has XY. We need that X. We get that X from the mother, right? Automatically, because she's two X's. And the father determines the gender by the X
right.
or the Y. So when we get into this, we have to recognize there truly are three sexes. Now, there are other persons who are trying to attach themselves onto the LGBTQ communities, such as these furries and these zoophiles and these people who have sex with animals and children. And they feel like, listen, this is who I am and this is who I identify as. And they're trying to make this child adult sexual relationship be coagulant with society, and it may have been several years before in Europe, in ancient Europe, where they would sell children at a young age to marriage. The kings, the queens, we relied on these things to be viable, but that's not the society that we live in now. And amongst those benefits that people try to adhere to and say, oh, some men are able to marry 10 women at one time, or, oh, these kings were able to have sex with their cousins. And they also had lynchings. They also had stonings. They also had other things that they lived by that most people would not want to associate themselves with. So sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to say that though that
Right.
there are three.
I growing up, I had heard of hermaphrodites, growing up, but I can honestly tell you over the last 33, 34 years, I cannot tell you the number of hermaphrodites I've counseled and worked with over the years, not only in America, but around the world. And as you were speaking, I was thinking of one that I recently counseled with, and he was born with, the male and the female body part. And when he was a little kid, his mother, according to him, his mother decided that he was going to be a female, and he was too young to make that decision for himself. But his mother decided that he was going to be a female, and so went and had surgery done and took off the male part and left the female part. But growing up, he felt like a boy. He did not feel like a girl. And so he tried to tell, as he got older, his father wasn't around, by the way, according to him. He tried to tell his mother that he was a boy, but she was like, no, you female, you have both parts, you're female. And and he grew up hating his mother because she dressed him in dresses, and but it just didn't, it wasn't who he really was. And so he finally heard my message about forgiveness. And he's like in his late 30s now, I think. And so he heard my message about forgiveness. And so he went and forgave his mother for forcing the female, the female part on him instead of letting him make that decision later in life, I guess. And so now he's becoming a man now. And so he's gonna have, if he haven't already had the surgery to have his male part put on back on, or however you do that, because he said that when he forgave, he felt free, and he saw clearly that in spite of what he has already done in life, the way he lived, that he could be a man now. And so he's doing that. And it was a sad story in that because he was a male, but she had put this female body part on him, kept that part. He became a drug addict, an alcoholic. It was difficult. He had considered suicide so many times, but God kept him around, kept him alive. And now he's starting to have a real life, a full life, in spite of going through that. So I'm very familiar with the hermaphrodite,
Yeah.
that happened
That
to men in my
society,
life.
that culture. And so, I'm definitely, when it comes to, I'm Republican, and I have a lot of friends and constituents who are what I call ignorant. And so they won't recognize the third sex at all. They won't recognize it. They say it's male and female. I recognize the third. And so, like you said, when it comes to that, we have to rely on God. We have to pray for these people to find some sort of, because they're dealing with something we have not had to go through.
That's right.
As a heterosexual woman born with a vagina, and my parents never had to decide for me which gender I was going to be. I don't have that fight. I don't have that fight. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have to decide, and then what it would be like to have to decide to explain to a sexual partner that I have both. You understand? So in instances like that, we have to pray. And then a few things, we have going on are, of course, the law saying that, children shouldn't be able to decide their own genders. They shouldn't be able to decide, but there are some genders who have both. But as a result of allowing this law to happen, people who are not affected by this will be able to change genders and just flip flop. And so, ironically and sadly, those people have to take precautions so that they are not at the the epitome of the butt end of the joke of what's going on right now, because people are really just seeing this as some sort of joke, and it's not. Like I said, it's good to have you here. Thank you for continuing on with me. I definitely
Yes.
want to get a few bit of artifacts. I'm weird. I'm different. I like to collect bits of information and keep them, because one day I realized that we won't always be here. Sometimes the people you love the most, you respect the most, they'll be here with you and then gone the next minute. And the only thing that we have usually back in the day were pictures, right? And memories.
Yeah.
But now today we're able to collect video, audio of people that we truly, truly admire. And so, of course, it's no doubt that you're somebody I truly admire. So, I want to collect these bits of artifacts from you. So, you were stating that you're from Alabama, you lived through the Jim Crow era. We were talking a little bit about Trump, a little bit about activism, getting involved, how important it is for us to be involved. So, now I want to speak with you about what you've seen growing up and what you've seen now. Okay. What is the biggest contrast that you've seen, and how would you like to see life move forward?
That's a really good question. There's so much happening now that I never imagined would happen. Number one, I never imagined one day that men would be turned away from their families, and that the men wouldn't, the individual male would not know how to fight for his own life, that he would just give up being a man and let the world dictate how he should live and the way to go and weaken him. I never imagined that that the government would be able to just take the children away from the parents and just do whatever they want with the children. I never imagined that if a parent or parents discovered that the public school were teaching their children anything other than reading, writing, arithmetic, and history, true history, that the parents would just send their children to those schools anyway, rather than either homeschooling them or finding a really good Christian or private school to put them in to make the sacrifice for the children. I never imagined that would happen. I never imagined that crime would be out of control, such as it is, right? And especially black crime, black on black or black crime, period. Because when I was growing up, that was unheard of. It was literally unheard of. When I was growing up, I can't, and I've been trying to think of it, excuse me, but I can't tell you that I know one criminal. Through my whole growing up until I left Alabama, I did not know any criminals. And I lived around black folks, with black folks and everything. I didn't know any criminals. And then I had no idea that they would defund the police. I just, and I just, I didn't know. Oh, one that's really stood out for me. I love being free, right? I love being free within, and I love being free without. And I grew up thinking that all people love freedom, because one thing about America, since I've been on Earth and I was born in America, we've always been free to do what we want, to live and work and do what we want. If somebody didn't want you in their area, fine. They had the right not to want, no big deal. So I never imagined that Americans would give up freedom of speech and freedom of the Second Amendment and the stuff that we're supposed to have. I just
Yeah.
never imagined that. And I never imagined that men and women would be fighting as they're doing. So all that mess, because growing up under the Jim Crow law, and I didn't think of it as being under the Jim Crow law when I was growing up either. I knew it existed. But because I'm a parent, my parents told me that our battle was a spiritual battle. It was a warfare between good and evil. The word racism didn't even exist. I had never heard the word racism until I moved to California. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so they said
Wow.
there are good people, black people, good white folks. There are bad white folks because of good and evil. So treat people the way you would like to be treated. So I never thought all this mess would come about when we were more divided than any other time in the history of America. I thought we would become as one. It would get better and better and better. I was too young to understand. I had no idea it would get worse.
Right, exactly. And I get that. But the Bible says that we're living in the signs of the times. That means that we're seeing tsunami after tsunami, earthquake after earthquake, man lying with man, homosexual activities, these different things. You understand? So we're seeing this. The further away that we come from perfection, we are seeing the destruction and down to annihilation, down to the fact that our God is going to step in, he's going to do something. And even if we don't see it in our times, we can have faith and believe in our Lord that it will happen. And so that's the reason why we're in this battle. We're in a battle to save, not our person. And we talk about this person as straw man all the time, but our souls. The person behind the person. We always talk about this in business. Oh, this person is so grand, they're so great, but we really need to recognize their assistants and the people who work in the background because they put all the work in. So it's like that here. And we're seeing it happening. Would you agree?
The one thing I noticed is that everything has been done already. It's been finished. When Christ died on the cross, he said that it's done. It's finished. Satan no longer has power. He is a deceiver. He is a cowardly, weak little spirit, and he no longer has power. And that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, that the kingdom, eternal life, is already present. And so God said, come into my present. Stop living in it. He said, bring every thought into captivity. All thoughts are all lies all the time about anything except
Yeah.
practical thoughts about what we're going to eat, what we're
Yeah.
going to wear.
And I want to stop. I don't want to stop you, but I do want to say, even when DNA, I just spoke with you briefly about DNA, and we talk about the DNA that we possess from other persons and microorganisms. And we also talk about rewriting our DNA, gene editing, the things that our government is doing. But we can rewrite our own genes. We are programmed to follow the genes of our ancestors. Some people say, I've broken the bond. I'm the first one that ever went through with college, with marrying my husband and having children. I'm the first one to get married in my generation. So I feel like you said, if we take these things and we rewrite our futures and our DNA, we're able to live longer based on our telomeres, the aging process. Of course, time and unforeseen occurrences befall us all, but we're able to live, we're able to have longevity if we take care of ourselves and our person. And the Bible is not just some dead little organization or written
Right.
word that just, merits that we read it and take, precaution of some things. No, this book that a lot of people like to disclaim as being some sort of hoax that the government gave to us actually helps us lengthen our lives. If we don't take in blood from other organisms, if we don't live a stressful, debauched life, if we don't pair our bodies and our DNA with other people's bodies and DNAs who we have no decision or no want to marry or be with, we are ruining ourselves. And so, even if we don't look at it as a book from God, we can still use it as viability in our lives today. Would you agree?
So, I agree that the Bible definitely has, if you read the Bible with the right mindset, and not trying to interpret the Bible, don't let the imagination interpret, but allow the Holy Spirit to uh, show us or to interpret what we're reading, you'll be fine. But I want to ask, are you a scientist? Did you tell me you were a scientist?
Yeah, I'm in school right now studying to be a scientist. I do
And how
own
do
a
you like
medical
that?
practice.
That's
I
amazing.
it's interesting. So I own a medical practice. I'm not sitting as a head doctor. I do what's called locum tenens. So I actually buy my doctors and I get them to represent my company. But I am a phlebotomist, a behavior health analyst, amongst a slew of other accolades that I have under my belt. And so I said, let's go ahead and put the nail in the coffin. Go ahead and get a degree for biology. Get accepted into a medical school in which I am and move forward, right? So,
Congratulations.
thank you. I appreciate that. But when it comes to, the research and the things that I have, I'm bombarded around scientists, some believing of God and some not. And I'm surrounded around these ideologies that are telling me don't believe in God. But everything in research and in science is telling me there is a God. And so there's this big disassociation with myself in research that says, you know what, there's a God, but there are also things on this earth that are going to help us get closer to God. And once we consume those things and we place them together, it all makes sense. But if we have one without the other, it will never make sense. And, are you understanding what I'm saying? If you don't agree with it, at
Yeah,
least.
right. Absolutely. I know scientists, not a lot of them at all,
And
but
now,
I do.
now, just to answer your question, because you did ask me a question, I do scientific research. I do intern with a company and we do scientific research.
Right on. It sounds interesting. That's the reason I asked about it because it sounds very, very interesting. And I do know a couple of scientists, and there are those who believe in God and those who don't, and they definitely see things differently. And it was interesting to see that they see it different. It all depends on your belief in God or not.
Yeah. And I've spoke with a few atheists. I've spoke with atheists who said, I used to believe in God. And I've spoke with atheists who said that I've never believed in God in my life. And the difference is that research, you have a organization that's based under a governmental experiment. Everything is research, everything is an experiment.
Yeah.
And so you are told you're basically not saying brainwash, I won't say that, but you're told to forget everything that you've learned as a human being, as a being that, practice spirituality. You're told to leave that outside of the room and totally focus on organisms, microorganisms, bionic microorganisms, and such. And so it is sort of a brainwashing. And when you do get deep, deep, deep into this research, you see that there are a lot of people who are from the LGBTQ communities. You see that there are a lot of people who are biologically engineered, and people that didn't have a father or mother but were born through STEM research. And though they like to say that we have people or persons who come from this background, you know what I'm saying, and it's just now happened in 2006, that's not the truth. These researches have been going on for years and years, and we have people who are walking amongst us who are not born from man like we were. And so we have to always take into consideration that some of the things that we are learning and are being pushed to brainwash us are from these secular people or secular agendas that were born from governmental funding.
Amazing. What a mess. I want to ask,
Sorry. Sorry, you said amazing. What a mess. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I know that we're running out of time here, but I want to ask, um, do you think the Great White Hope will be reelected next year?
I'm still stuck on the last thing you said, but yes, I think that, and I'm an activist. I just
I
went as
know,
a
yeah.
delegate this year for our state convention. I was voting for people who were elected into our Republican Party to kind of represent us statewide, but it's not just on a statewide level. These people, we are in control of getting from our state, of course, getting persons elected, going to Congress, representing us. And so when you ask me the question, do I believe that the Great White Hope would still be elected this upcoming term? Yes, I do. I
No,
do. Because it's not just it, we have to remember that it's the people. You
yeah.
understand? And when you go to a Trump rally or you go to a Trump speech or you go to Faith and Freedom just had it, and a lot of people were like, you know what, I don't agree with Trump. I don't like him. He stands for poor, blah, 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 whatever. I won't repeat it. I
Right,
don't want to speak that
right.
into existence. But they're
That's
saying all
right.
kind of negative things about him. But one thing that they can't deny is when he comes out to speak, those people go crazy.
Yeah.
Jesse, I'm talking about they clap, they applaud. Some of those people have literally stayed up all night for days in a line to be able to greet and meet him and say, listen, I don't know what the world is saying about you. I don't care. I stand with you because everything that you're representing is of the people. We have been oppressed. We have been told to be quiet because our opinions, our feelings, the research that we have doesn't equate with what they want it to fit. We are the ones that have been told to shut up, to be quiet. We are the people who were fighting for freedom, not just religious freedom, but also freedom for the man and the woman to be married. And as Black people, we should understand where we come from. Like you said, the Jim Crow era, you guys fought to be able to marry. You understand when you were living on those, when people were living on those plantations, they weren't able to marry who they wanted to. They weren't able to get married like that. From what I've researched, they weren't able to just go up and say, hey, I love you. I like you. I want to get to know you. I want you to have my children. They were killed for trying to build children and have children as Black people. So when we have these Black people saying, I'm blue, I'm Democrat, I want to go for these LGBTQ communities that are saying that, they're only just trying to do right and do male and female, and they feel like all these other genders. We have people who are sleeping with pigs, with dogs, with cats, are recognizing themselves as dogs and cats. And then not only are they sleeping with these animals, they're going back, they're mixing that DNA with human DNA. They're sleeping with male, with women. They are tainting us as a society while we struggle to hold on to the little bit that we do have. And I don't think they understand what this is coming from and where it's also leading to. You understand? I understand there are three sexes now. There were two, but I understand there are three. That third is a mutation. And I don't, you may not agree, but this is what I'm saying genetically. That's a mutation. And we can't try to inculcate that as being normal. They have a battle on their hands. We can pray for them spiritually, but all these people tacking themselves onto this, trying to make a mockery out of science and politicism is just outwardly wrong. I think Trump, he actually said, listen, I understand. He recognized that there are these types of people also, as much as the LGBTQ community likes to go against them. He recognizes it.
Yeah.
And he says, listen, what we need more now is God than ever. We need, not even if you don't believe in God, we need people who are willing to listen, people who are willing to care, people who are willing to negotiate and interact with both people. We don't need people who are just trying to cause us to a sense of self-destruction. And that's what Jesus did when he was here walking this earth, regardless of what anybody believes. Jesus was here. He came to save us.
Yeah.
And again, we have Trump. Trump is here trying to save us. He told us one day at a meeting, he said, listen, the only thing standing in between the people is me. He said that these people, this government wants you. They want to take your rights. They want to censor you, as we see happening today. If I say something as far as the LGBTQ community that goes against their rights or whatever, if I say anything that goes against this country whatsoever, I am censored. I am shadow banned. I'm put to the bottom of the list. This should not be happening, but it is happening. Why is it happening? It's happening because our government is now allowing it to happen. And that's not what we stand for. You understand? It's just like when you're dating somebody, somebody comes to you and tells you who they are and what they represent, and you later find out that's not what they represent. That's what we're finding about America. And Trump is trying to keep us on track. And that's how I feel about Trump.
I noticed that though Donald Trump, the Great White Hope, is leading in the poll, there are Republican representatives who don't want him there, and they'll fight it against it. And I would think, and I know why, I understand why, because their own personal greed, they want
Yeah, you're
power.
right about the personal greed and the power. Now we got Brian Kemp and we got Kelly Loeffler. Kelly Loeffler's husband owns part of the WNBA. All right, the same organization that had a whole anti-pro-life campaign is the same people that own the pro-life campaigns. So we're seeing it in politics. Yes, we are. Excuse
Yeah,
me.
and I know that's what it is. It's all personal, and 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 that's what's really disappointing about the Republican Party, because when I first became a Republican, the party was about the people. They were about what is right. And now we finally got a man like Donald Trump that would bring things back to order, jobs and the borders, and getting respect around the world that we had when he was president. I'm disappointed that they are not all for that. And they were supposed to be for that. So I'm hoping that they get voted out and they place them with men that are going to stand up for America and not a fight, because they should welcome Donald Trump. The people want him. I mean, that's who the Republican voters say they want, but they don't want it because they don't want to lose their fake identities and things like that. Are you in Atlanta?
No. Oh, no. I'm actually in Douglasville. Atlanta got a little bit too blue for me. I used to live in Atlanta, but it got a little bit blue. And so I left. I could be under those restrictions. And you
Okay.
decided to bring your business. I don't know if you have schools, if you want to do start a school out here or a church organization. This would be one of the grander areas out here because we have so much land and population. It's considered the suburbs, correct? But
Oh,
we have so much land and population out here that literally this would be one of the grandest places to start that business.
nice. I'm about to check it out.
Oh, come check it out. Come check it
And
out.
I'll
Let me take you
definitely,
out to eat.
yeah, I'll
I'll
let you
definitely,
know for
I
sure.
will definitely look forward to taking you out. You meeting my husband. My husband's been a fan of yours for several years. So that would be wonderful. If you need a flight, we'll
Absolutely.
pay for the flight. But
Nice.
um, but yeah, so there's a lot going on and there's a
Yeah.
lot that we missed. And I appreciate you for coming on and speaking with me for a second time, of course,
Yeah.
about what's going on. Because I do think, and as much as we like to say, especially as older people, that the world has come to this, things are so bad. There are solutions. There's God. Not only is there God in Jesus, we can improve who we are as a person and how we contribute to society. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you for coming coming on, and I respect you for, taking the time out of the day, even though we went through a few technical, difficulties. I appreciate you. And
Absolutely.
may the will of God be done here on earth as it is in heaven, meaning that if Georgia is the place for you, we welcome you.
I'm gonna
let
definitely let
let
you.
the let the support, the abundance of monetary support that you need. We know that money is the root of all evil, but we know that we need it here and today in society in order to,
That's right.
propel us forward. May that encompass you so that you can find yourself in cities and states where your word, where the word of God will
Yeah.
be received.